Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 20th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd firstly like to recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. As members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, we are welcoming Councillors Brown and Armstrong this morning to the meeting via Zoom. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Robertson, we have none. Motion for adoption of the agenda as a... Thank you. Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Martman, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favour. Motion carries. We have no delegations. On to reports. And the first is the Travel Assistance Grant, Nanaimo District Lacrosse Association, U16A2 Timberman. And I have Mr. Harding up for that.
You took my seat.
Morning, Mr. Harding. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Worship. Any questions on the travel grant? It fits the criteria. Again, like I mentioned last time, it's exciting to actually see some traveling happen again with our sports teams. It's a grant that Council has set aside every year, the $7,000, and so this one, it meets the criteria. If there's any questions, though, I'd be pleased to answer.
Very good. Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? No questions? All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is the quarterly purchasing report, single and sole source purchases in excess of $250,000 at instances of non-compliance purchases. Ms. Mercer, good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship. So this report outlines the sole source single submission purchases as well as policy compliance per our city's procurement policy for the period January 1st to March 31st, 2022. Appendix 1 outlines the sole and single source purchases. Appendix 2 outlines the purchases over 250. And we had two instances of a non-compliance with the policy. And in one instance, the project took longer than anticipated to complete. And the other related to transitional costs relating to Tourism Nanaimo. And that included costs for the interim director position. And so if staff are here to answer any questions that you may have about any of these items.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, and I was going to ask about tourism.
Councillor Martman, I recognize Councillor Bonner first.
Oh, sorry.
That's great. She can go first.
The enthusiasm for questioning Ms. Mercer is appreciated, but we'll let Councillor Bonner go first and then you, Councillor Martman.
Thank you, Worship. Just three items under the single source purchases of less than $25,000. I was wondering if I understand that the reasons are part of a standard set of reasons, but I was wondering if I can have a little bit more explanation regarding completion item 2868, which is Lanark 2015 Consultants, and not that I'm questioning their ability to do great work in this city, and we owe them a great deal of debt for the work that they've done on Reimagine Nanaimo. I was just wondering why they would be a specialized training for a landscape architect design at Westwood. The other one was the Blackbird Security, again, specialized training when it was just requiring proof of vaccination checking, which gets done at every pub by anybody with 10 minutes of training. And the final one was the relocation of the bleachers. I think its completion file number is 3086, and it's the Shuttle Recreation Parks and Playground. The reason is to ensure compatibility with the existing equipment, but we're just transferring equipment from one place to another. So I was just wondering why anybody couldn't do that has a trailer.
Your Worship,
I can see Mr. Groot is waiting to.
Your Worship, I'll answer some of them. Also, Mr. Groot will be on. Unfortunately, Lynn is on holidays, and Darcy, which did the Blackbird one, so I'll try and answer the best. If not, I'll have to get some more information for you. On the first one, which is the Lanark, that's for the Westwood one. is we're actually, our main contractor there is for the project, it was the engineering firm, escaping me right now. Art was the engineering firm that we're using there.
Mr. Groot.
Yeah, good morning.
What was the engineering firm we're using for Westwood right now? It's
Sorry, say that again. I had a little technical difficulty with my sound there.
just anyway, it's sub to the engineering firm. They're initially with our concept and through our public engagement process. And so we kept them on with the going through for the final design, detailed design. So it was more of a, you're right, there's other companies that would have that expertise. It was a consistency working with the engineering firm and with Lanark on getting us to the next detailed design of the first phase of the Westwood project.
Thanks.
The Blackbird security, we'll need to look into that a little more. I believe it was again, it was not so much the expertise side, but the quickness we had to find it, as well as it was difficult for us to actually find firms and staff. So it was during the pandemic, it was tough to get, as we're reopening, to get staff in different firms. So it was probably more of an to expedite more than the special needs. Mr. Groot can answer more about the bleachers, but it was mainly the bleacher removal was the same company that installed, and so they had the expertise of installing them. We asked them, it's their product, to then remove and reinstall. But Mr. Groot can answer some more questions on that. Did you hear me there, Art?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bonner, Mr. Harney is correct regarding the bleachers. The bleachers were purchased through Subtle Recreation back in 2014. And then as a result of the move over to the stadium district and splitting the bleachers into two pieces, it was really important for us to make sure that we went through the same supplier manufacturer to add the pieces that we were going to need to move, one section, about a third of the set was moved over to the third baseline and then, or is going to be moved to the third baseline in the fall. And then the first base set needed a bunch of modifications as well. So really it absolutely had to do with compatibility and ensuring that the manufacturer and supplier could meet those needs for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martman, and then Councillor Turley.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning regarding tourism Nanaimo, but I'm wondering, 148,000, is that just for the 3 months?
Through your worship to Councillor Martman, no, that is from the start to
Last July or whenever the
Yeah.
transitioning was beginning?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, I understand it.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding, and in reference to Councillor Bonner's questions, I would like to confirm that my grandson works for security firms and they're desperate for people. And one of the companies he was working for at the time had the contract for the vaccination center, and they had to give it up because they couldn't staff it. So, and the other point I'd like to make with regard to these amounts under 25,000 or thereabouts, I question why you would go out to the market for something, say, for around 20,000, because it's probably going to cost you at least that much or more just to do the RFP and to seek input. So I'm quite comfortable with all of these. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a very general question, Ms. Mercer. Noticing any significant increase or decrease in the number of non-compliance, et cetera, the single and sole source purchases?
Through Your Worship, no, it's occasionally for exceptional circumstances do we go outside the policy or go over that 75 limit, and then there are just in some cases things happen where the project gets extended or some other work comes up that was unanticipated. So
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. This is just a report. Appreciate it very much. The next is consideration of security check grant. Again, Ms. Mercer, please.
thank you, Your Worship. So we've received an application for our security check grant program from the Nanaimo District Senior Citizens Housing Development Society in the amount of $500. So this society meets the eligibility criteria for the grant program. And the annual maximum amount per applicant under the program is $500. So they're within, their ask is within the amount or the program. And there is a full budget of $2,000 is available. So there's room for funding of this. And so staff are looking for the committee's recommendation with this application.
Thank you very much. Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Bonner. I just might add here that this particular fund, which has been available for a long time, it's interesting how many folks do make inquiries without any knowledge that in fact the city has a number of programs like this to assist. So I'm certainly glad this particular group made the application. They do important work that enables seniors to stay in their homes. So seeing no further questions, comments, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the Local Government Climate Action Program. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. Good morning, Council. I think this is simply an information report, but some good news to share regarding an issue that we had reported to you earlier on, which was the discontinuation of what was called the CARET program, the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program by the province. And that program had been operating since 2008, and most recently the city was getting about $144,000 a year through that program that you were putting into your sustainability reserves. You were matching that with $165,000 from taxation that you were putting into the reserve. But that program discontinued, and at the time there was no clear path forward. We did find out in the spring of this year, the province has announced a new program, the Local Government Climate Action Program. And the result is the city will now be eligible to receive $325,000 a year, so a significant increase over the CAREP. There is a condition that we have to have 20% matching funds. So the good news is the $165,000 that we had already set aside and are bringing through taxation meets that requirement. So we're fully eligible for the $325,000. So certainly happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. With the additional funding, are we looking at different projects, or are we looking to, for building the reserve, do we have our eye on it for anything?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hemmons, I just noticed that our Manager of Sustainability, Ting Pan, has joined us this morning, so maybe I'll ask her to come down and talk a little bit about the potential projects.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. So we have identified a list of projects both to support emission reductions and resilience in the community, as well as reducing our emissions of our city-owned facilities, and they are being incorporated into the 2023 to 2027 financial plans. So you'll be able to see some of those projects.
A follow-up, if I may. Thank you. So we are, I just note that we have to spend the funding by 2025. So are we advancing projects in the next financial plan as a result of this?
Yes, I think it, through your worship, I think that we're aware that there is that timeline. So when we're, I think when Wendy was going through the list of projects, she was particularly paying attention to which projects we fund through the city taxation and others through this source, so that you know, we understand that some projects are hard to be done in that time frame. So that is being taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. Always nice to have a good news story. Appreciate your attendance this morning. The next is the Metro Drive Complete Streets Phase 2 funding. Mr. Sims, good morning.
Good morning, Worship, and thank you. Morning, Council. There's the next series of reports are a number of projects where there's some budgetary impacts, as you've seen in your agenda. I'll turn it over to Ms. Fipke, who's the project manager for the first two projects that are on the agenda, just to walk you through the report briefly, and of course, Mr. Stewart's here as well for any other questions, but anyone else. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fipke. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a couple years since I've been in front of you to talk about complete streets and Metro Drive in particular, so I wanted to quickly give you an update on where things are at, as well as the awards. Metro Drive and the complete streets has garnered a lot of attention and positive feedback from the engineering community. We've received a provincial award, a federal award, as well as an international award for the projects. I've also been asked to speak at 3 national conferences on Nanaimo's achievements. I've recently been asked to help author a report on raised locals and the importance that they hold, as well as being approached by over a dozen municipalities across the country who are wanting to adopt similar standards. So huge kudos to the City of Nanaimo for those accomplishments. Metro Phase 1 came in 1.1 million under budget last year, and we were on schedule, unfortunately, due to construction challenges, notably unsuitable soils. Phase 2 is projected to be 1.4 million over budget. This will come from reserves and won't affect taxation, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Phippy. So the under budget amount of 1.1, was it million? Is that then move forward to phase 2? So we're actually looking at a shortfall of about 300 grand? Or am I reading this wrong?
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship to Councillor Turley. So we didn't carry forward that money specifically for this phase 2, but whatever money was unspent remained in the reserve, and that money can be used to fund the shortfall for phase 2. Plus, if that was the most, the best use of that funding source, or there might have been other sources that were mixed in there as well. But that money goes back to the reserve to fund projects in the future.
Great, thank you.
If I may, occasionally we get the odd complaint, particularly arising out of the construction, Pleasant Valley, et cetera, the entrance and so on. And I just wonder if you could comment on what I believe to be the obvious, but obviously some people don't seem to appreciate that. None of these roads, additions, changes, et cetera, are making the roads so narrow that vehicles can't turn. I think it's fair to say that we've done traffic counts. We know the volume of traffic that's coming through these intersections and the concerns around stop signs as opposed to lights, et cetera. I just wonder if you could offer some general comments and maybe use this as a teachable moment, as we seem to be moving quickly this morning through the Finance Audit Committee meeting, that might assist the public in understanding there's a reason why this project has won awards and why it looks so good. In other words, could you toot the horn a little, please, this morning?
Thank you, Your Worship. To answer your question, to elaborate a little bit more on the design, yes, when we do transportation projects, we look at traffic counts, we take traffic counts, we do speed counts, we model also into the future on what we expect from a development standpoint. We also use this tool called AutoTurn in CAD that allows us to pick certain design vehicles and certain control vehicles to be able to model the intersection, and that will determine the curves and the radiuses of the intersections, whether compound curves are needed, etc. So yeah, there is a lot of effort that goes into that, as well as from the kind of volume perspective. Yes, it goes without saying that change is difficult, and the change management is hard, and there's always going to be an adjustment period for people to kind of get used to these new designs because they are different. I know that when the three-way stops went in, there was kind of some outcry, but then I've also had dealings with the school and different community groups who are ecstatic and say that it operates a lot better now than it did before. So I think it's one of those things that given time, people will kind of see the benefits, and yes. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. And if you could also comment on Enterprise Way, there's been a couple of comments about that as well. That's the connection into basically Superstore from the old highway.
Yes, Your Worship. So Enterprise intersection, we did a lot of modeling in regards to that whole section all the way to Alds, and 5 lanes is not required. It was overbuilt in the first place. And so when we overbuild roads, which I will talk to in my next report, this leads to kind of unsafe behaviors and speeding and the rest of it. So when we modeled it, it could be achieved with a 3-lane cross section. We modeled it different ways, like Enterprise in particular. We looked at different lane allocations, and through the modeling they worked. The reason that people are getting frustrated right now is because when we had to go through the intersection, we trenched through the intersection and disturbed the induction loops, so the circular things that trigger the lights to turn. And so right now the intersection is operating on timers only, which is causing issues in the queuing because it's not communicating with, say, the Highland Highway. And so once the curb returns are going in, and they're going in this week, thankfully, we have cement back. But once the cameras go in and the induction goes back in, they will be smart and they will be able to communicate with the signals that are on the highway, and then we'll be able to kind of manage that, and traffic will be flowing and there won't be queuing happening. So it's a kind of awkward stage right now where we can't do anything about it. We have to kind of just wait for everything to be in place so that we can put the induction back in, and then the traffic will flow.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated this morning. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following on your line of questioning, there's a statement that since the completion of Phase 1, there's been a significant increase in land redevelopment activity. Could I have someone just kind of flesh that out a little bit? And do we think that's a result of the complete street? Do we think they're connected? Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't have the projects in front of me this morning, but I think on Monday night when Mr. Holm was here and running through applications we received, there was at least a couple of projects that he had mentioned that we're developing along Metro Drive. So one of the significant costs for development is frontage works and services. So if developers can find property where the works and services are done, and there's no cost to them to move forward with their project, it is a significant incentive. So how much of that is having the street completed, having the road work done versus the type of street, I can't say for sure. But we do know that where we see public investment, private investment follows consistently.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Armstrong. Sorry, how could I miss you?
Thank you. I do have a question. Have we talked to the businesses about the impact that it's had? Because the one I've had, the conversations I've had with businesses is that the new design has negatively impacted their businesses to the point where some are actually leaving the area. Is that something that we could look at?
Worship, I think to Councillor Armstrong's question, it's a really good one, and I think there's a balance here. I know there was extensive public engagement and contact with each of the businesses throughout, leading up to the construction, and as Ms. Vipke hinted at, we're in this really awkward stage of construction, so things are disrupted, and once things sort of normalize, I think the public will find, and we found, certainly in my career here at the city, that anytime there's that disruption, once things normalize and get back to a stable state, things calm down, traffic finds its way, and people find their way back to those businesses, and I think that'll be the case here. Your Worship.
Well, I think it's a little late for some of them because they've already relocated, because this is in the completed part of Metro where they've left. So that was my concern. And I guess the other concern I have is that and again, I follow Facebook, and I know Councillor Thorpe has heard the same. Probably 1 out of 20 like the design and the other 19 hate it. So I think that's something we need to look at and maybe do a follow-up surveys later, so that we look, since we're adopting the complete streets, the majority of the issues is the narrowness of the road. There's no place to move over for emergency vehicles. And then when the buses and big vehicles are there, people have to sit and wait and wait and wait. So I think it's something we need to look at.
Your Worship, one of the points that we've had certainly extensive discussions with emergency services on this, and there was a recent fire, as Council may recall, only a couple of weeks ago, where a home along Metro was destroyed, and the fire department was able to mobilize and operate there. They did acknowledge, I will acknowledge that they did close the road just because they needed to snake their hoses across the road and so on. So it was quite a large fire with a multiple response. One of the things that I'd be remiss in mentioning is that we've received over these two phases $1 million in granting from the British Columbia government UBCM's active transportation grant. So that's a significant contribution to this. And certainly, further to Councillor Armstrong's point, this is certainly a trial case. It's a bit of a showpiece, but it's a trial case for complete streets. And as Mr. Lindsay noted, the private investment is likely to follow, and we'll see how this redevelops. But certainly, Metro Drive is less of a commuter route for vehicles than the highway, which is a few hundred meters to the east.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments? I just want to say thank you very much for this report before we move to a vote on this. I appreciate the frustration of the public during construction phase, but nothing's changed since I was a kid. If you're going to reconstruct roads or make improvements, guess what? Things get disrupted. And I guess I would say to the good citizens of Nanaimo who have concerns about what's happened on Metro Drive, can you please just wait until it's finished and it's fully operational, and then I'll be happy to take criticism about what things may or may not happen. But I think there's a certain level of unnecessary negativity around some aspects of this project, which time will show, or in fact weren't warranted. I look at those streets, that Metro Drive, and I look at the improvements to sidewalks, pedestrian, cycling, the calming of traffic. If I were a parent with a home on that street and now I have a sidewalk and a place for my kids to cycle to school, to Pleasant Valley, and I know that cars aren't speeding along it, ripping through what is essentially, in most respects, a residential neighborhood with commercial at either end, then people should be pleased. So if I've inspired anyone to say anything, forgive me. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank staff and Ms. Fipke for the good work and move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Sorry. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was waiting till there was a motion on the floor for the recommendation, and I feel I do need to make a comment here and just a bit of a bookmark, because I do have some concerns over this project, and I don't think we should be trivializing the concerns that other people have expressed. And I think it goes beyond just the construction phase. I think there are factors of this project which are very good, and in fact I had a cyclist last night tell me how much they appreciated this new proposal and what's happening along Metro. But I have also heard, as Councillor Armstrong obviously has, from numerous residents who have serious concerns about what it's going to be like when it is finished, not just during construction. I have concerns over road narrowing and decrease in traffic flow. Those might be ameliorated in the future, they might not. We've acknowledged that this is sort of basically a pilot project for complete streets, and yes, we've won awards, but pretty pictures are one thing. Efficient operation of a transportation system is another. So I'll be very curious to see when this is finished, how efficient it is for all parties concerned. But again, I don't think we can just turn a blind eye to those people who have expressed their frustrations and their concerns, which I see as legitimate. So with respect to you, Your Worship, and your viewpoint, and with complete respect to staff, of course, and their work on this, I am not going to vote in favor of this recommendation, just to make a bit of a bookmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. I'll respond in a minute, but we'll go to Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's anecdotal, and I appreciate the comments of Councillor Thorpe. Bookmarking this thing, I'm sure everyone will remember this come October. I'm just curious about not so much curious, I've noticed the type of complaints we're getting. And based on the emails that we get as complaints, I can actually figure out where the construction is starting. Because now we're getting complaints at the north end, and we're not getting any more complaints at the south end anymore. And we used to get ones in the middle, and now it's moving forward. So anecdotally, it would mean to me that people complain because they don't necessarily see the full vision of it coming forward. But when it is there, then they realize, okay, this seems to be working, and I'm going to get used to it, and life's going to carry on. So That's my anecdotal view of this thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through to either Ms. Mercer or the staff that is working on it. So the thing that comes to mind, whether we agree with it or not, we're in it. And what happens if we don't approve the extra funds? I mean, is the construction stop and it remains this way until funding is found to finish it? That's my concern. I really don't think we have a choice but to fund it. Whether we agree with it or not is, at this stage, kind of irrelevant, so, in my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, I think Councillor Turley's got the nub of it for sure. We're deep into it. This is just an additional, I guess the approval is really about using the reserves to fund the over budget amount. Thank you.
I can't resist responding to Councillor Thorpe and not being much of a gambler in my life. I'm willing to bet that when the project is finished, we'll get even more accolades than those people who've raised concerns will, if they have the courage to do so, come forward and compliment the city and everyone who's had involvement in this project. For me, it's akin to raising children. Our son was a complete brat. I can state that publicly. He was a pain as a teenager, and he's turned into one of the finest young men I know. So sometimes you just have to be patient. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Thorpe opposed. Thank you very much. Motion carries. The next are Mary Ellen Drive intersection improvement funding. Mr. Sims.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll quickly pass this over to Ms. Vipke again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Your Worship. Mary Ellen was designed and constructed over 20 years ago when a very different transportation philosophy was present. It was built to an arterial collector standard or urban arterial standard. There are an excess of lanes, there are long crossing distances, there is speeding along the corridor because it is sandwiched between two provincial highways, and as well because there is no traffic control at this intersection in particular. There's a lot of confusion, and during congested periods, peak hours during the Christmas period sort of thing, it gets very backed up and people are confused. We currently have just over $200,000 from community contributions to improve the intersection. So this is an information report because we are needing to do a budget transfer for $160,000 to increase the budget to be able to construct it. ICBC has helped us review. They did a road safety audit of the design. And yeah, do you guys have any questions?
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Vipke. So some of the roundabouts that have been constructed, and I'm just assuming that this one will allow for semi-trailers to get around?
Sorry, I didn't turn off my mic. Through the chair to Councillor Turley. Yes, because this is a low-cost roundabout, which is important to kind of point that out, that we did explore kind of completely pulling apart the entire intersection back in 2014, but the expense would have been too high. So this is a low-cost alternative. It utilizes existing curbs and existing drainage. There will be restrictions on turning movements, but we have talked with both property owners. So it will accommodate vehicles and all movements, however, and delivery trucks. However, large WB20s, so the largest that deliver to that property, will have to do right in and right out movements.
Good. Thank you.
In order, Councillors Thorpe, Gesselbrock, and Bonner.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Worship. I thought Councillor Armstrong had her hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say I probably ignored you so much you figured I'd ignored you again.
No, you haven't ignored me at all. I just wanted to put another bookmark down, Councillor Bonner, and this one to state that I am enthusiastically supportive of this project because I've lost track and count of the number of people who've asked me when we are going to do improvements at this location. I think it's long overdue and it's very welcome. So pleased to see this move ahead, and will happily support, well, I know there's no recommendation, but happy to hear this news, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to go back to Councillor Turley's. I just wanted to know where the big trucks will access, because when they come off the, most of them come off the parkway, how are they going to be able to access in? Because a lot of them are B trains with the occasional C train.
If you could just repeat your question, some of us couldn't quite hear it, Councillor Armstrong.
No, just following up what Councillor Turley said, I'm concerned about when the big trucks come off the parkway, which most of them do, and some of them are B trains with the occasional C train. There's not how are they going to get in there? Because there's not the width to allow them. Are they going to have to go down and someplace find a place to U-turn and then come all the way back up? Or how are we dealing with that?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. So B trains, because of the multiple hinge points, they can actually do a tighter turn than, say, a WB20. This is all being reviewed. The design has the auto turn. We've gone through it multiple times. There will have to be some rerouting. However, the properties, we have engaged with them, and this is important enough from a day-to-day operations perspective, that they will reroute like Alds and come in and do right in, right out movements. As far as the Woodgrove property, they have 6 other accesses as well as this one.
It's not the Woodgrove, it's across the street I'm worried about. And I'm not so worried about that you've talked to the owners. The truckers don't talk to the owners, so they'll do their own thing. So that's what I'm concerned about. Has there been conversation with the trucking association or those that are going in there? Because we've seen this happen in the past where, oh yeah, it's okay, the owners say they won't do it, but then they do, and then we end up with a big mess.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, yes, we can talk to the trucking association.
Yeah, I think that's really important because they're the ones that know it. It's not the owners of the buildings. They know what they're going to do, and they're going to be able to tell you that the flaw is better than anybody. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, Bonner, and Turley.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just got to say that this traffic circle here makes me happy, and I think it's going to make a lot of other people happy. A number of times I've been pulling out of the Save On Foods, and it's just like everybody's looking at each other. It's like, okay, who goes? How do we do this? And it's a pinch point. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and I would like to support Councillor Thorpe's bookmarks on this one as well, as I'm quite looking forward to this this new work. I do have a couple of questions regarding pedestrians, if I may. Is there enough room if a car is coming off of the highway, say that red vehicle there, and wants to turn right, but then there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and then another car wants to go through the roundabout? Like, at what point does the roundabout get blocked if there's a whole bunch of pedestrians going around that, and then what would happen then?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So yes, we did design the splitter island such that a car can stage in that area and vehicles can still maneuver around the roundabout. The only issue would be if they say there was a bus or a larger truck that, you know, extended beyond a typical passenger vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm okay with this with crosswalks where they are. I thought that maybe we would want them on all 4 corners so that you didn't have to go a roundabout to get someplace. But then I realized that on the bottom left there, it's just a restaurant and a gas station. So I can see why we're doing that there. Thanks.
Okay.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I'd just like to make reference to Councillor Armstrong's concerns, and I've put my delivery person hat on to do this. So when I organize deliveries for the shop, I always make sure that I can get at least 6 an hour out, which means they're going to be condensed. And I use to make sure that you go from point A to point B in the shortest distance. So if I was driving a big truck, and I don't, but if I'm coming north and going to, for say, McDonald's on the north side of Mary Ellen, I would not go as far as the turnoff off of the parkway. I would turn right south of Woodgrove and then left onto 19A, left onto Mary Ellen, and then you go right in. Coming from the north, if you were going to the same location, again, you do come off the parkway on that loop around and onto 19A, and you're turning right onto Mary Ellen and right into the other. If you're going from Mary Ellen and going south again, you may have to go right on to Mary Ellen and then right onto the Parkway. And the only thing that we may have to look at is some means of, if they're going north and they want to go south, that's kind of the pinch point. Unless they can get around and get into the Woodgrove property from the north side of Mary Ellen. But otherwise, the other ones shouldn't be an issue if they think out how they're going to properly get in and out of there. But anyway, it's not. I don't think it's as big a problem as it may be thought by some. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say I always appreciate Councillor Armstrong's concerns around traffic and access for larger vehicles, but like Councillor Gesselbrock, and being a co-op member, on occasion if I'm north of town, I often go to that gas station, occasionally to Chapters, and I must say I find that intersection to be, for me, one of the most frightening in the community, because people tend to come whipping off the Parkway, they tend to be speeding towards the Parkway. In terms of my concerns and the double lanes, etc., I think this is a marvelous solution, and I appreciate the concerns around trucks, but I think the inconvenience that will occasionally, without question, as intersections, roundabouts create inconvenience for some, will occasion inconvenience for larger trucks on occasion. As Councillor Turley says, when you're in the trucking industry, you figure out the routes that are satisfactory and you will make do. We have large deliveries being made in major cities across this country. I'm a huge fan of roundabouts, and my first experience with them was driving in England on the right-hand side of the road when I was younger and brighter and sharper, but even then I found it terrifying for a little while. But once you're used to a roundabout, highly efficient movement of traffic, very safe. So I'm delighted to see this solution. If for the amount of money involved, this is money well spent, and I think the convenience and enhancement of safety to the public, I can even if it's not a high accident intersection, I think the relief of stress for drivers trying to get through there on any given day is probably is more than worth the money involved. So thank you to staff this morning and Mr. Sims for providing us with this update. The next item is the Kiteway, and pardon me, I've inspired Councillor Bonner and Councillor Brown and Councillor Armstrong. Oh my goodness, I should shut up this morning.
Councillor Brown was first.
Councillor Brown first.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very much agree with your comments. A hand was up before then, so you didn't inspire me, but I do agree with the comments that you and Councillor Gesselbrock made, and I think, perceptually, it is kind of a crazy intersection, no matter where you are at it and where you're trying to go to. And I think it's just a perfect example to some of the points made earlier around how overbuilt infrastructure can actually produce environments that don't feel safe. And I'm speaking from this one as usually when I'm in this intersection, it's as a driver. So I think this is a great project, and I'm glad to see all these retrofit projects come in and make the states, make our streets safer for all users, but more importantly, just properly built infrastructure for the intended use. So thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Bonner.
Sure.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, I just wanted to say I am in favor of this project. I didn't want you to think I'm not. I just wanted to make sure that when we look at it, because it might be a difference of maybe extending a curb less than a foot. So that's all my point was, to make sure that we take their concerns into consideration so we don't have to go back and refix.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. This is not so much related to this project, but it's a similar issue of traffic accidents. And a recent report that came out from ICBC lists Metro Drive and Island Highway as the 265 crashes last year. And that's a relatively new piece of infrastructure that was built. Obviously not by us, I understand by the province. Are we looking at the possibility of finding ways to mitigate some of that with the province or on our own?
Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, I think that intersection, some of the negative feedback you're hearing from residents is around that intersection during construction. But once construction is complete, it'll be reduced by one of the lanes. So I'm hopeful that as we go forward, that will be a little bit simpler of an intersection for people to navigate. We're talking at Metro and Woodgrove and Alds, is that where you?
No, the Island the Island Highway and Mostar.
Oh, Mostar.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm not aware of any plans. I'd have to check in with Mr. Rose and get back to council.
Would it be in our best interest and the interest of the people who are having these, hopefully not having these accidents in the future, just to put up a great big sign that says 265 accidents last year, pay attention?
I think that's one thing that ICBC has done in the past is they put up the signs that say high crash location, and just to help raise awareness. I don't know if signage really changes behavior much, but that's a good thing. We can check in with our road safety crew.
Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, if I may, one point I'd like to underscore that Ms. Vipke made is on the Mary Ellen roundabout is that a good portion of the funding is coming from private contributions from the developments on either side of Mary Ellen. So we recognize that it's been recognized that this has been a challenge for years, and as developments, especially on the west or north side of Mary Ellen, have proceeded, that there's been that contribution to the corporation, and so that's going towards this, and I think that's just an important acknowledgement to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Sims. It's a good reminder that the people, quote unquote, who have the greatest financial interest in this particular intersection recognize that improvements need to be made. So very positive. It's only a matter for report. Question period. I'm going to assume no one is here. Sorry, Councillor. Kiteway, sorry, Kiteway, yes. How could I skip Kiteway?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll ask Mr. Stewart to just briefly talk about this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. So Kiteway and Meadow Lane was part of a cost share with the Regional District in Nanaimo with our water infrastructure and their sewer infrastructure. Again, one of these projects where we found some unsuitable geotechnical conditions, found some infrastructure of ours that was in really poor shape, and so the project required any additional funding. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Very good. I'm not seeing any questions, comments from anyone. No question period now. We have no other business. Move for adjournment. Seconded Councillor Martman, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor, thank you very much.